Марта?
Тихенько, бо вже шарим.
Так, я бачу, що далі в мене ця нижня ця йде.
Hello. Hey guys. Can you hear me well? Please type in the chat. Okay. I'm sorry. Just a quick, let me Can you hear me and can you see me? Sorry for being late a little bit. Okay, I can see that you have already joined. Perfect. Okay. Well, first of all, welcome to our Beacon webinar this evening. I'm saying good evening because I believe that for most of you it is evening time, but please let me know in the chat. Maybe we have someone of us for whom it is morning. So please share in the chat what is your vocation, where are you located at this moment. I just want to make sure that everything is working properly before we go. So let me check the chat. So, we have good morning from Mexico. Nice. We have from Ukraine. We also have Sweden. Again, Ukraine. Wow, really nice. And we have this diverse audience this evening and morning. That's great. Also Ireland. Nice. Okay. But before we start, I just want to ask you one more question. Is it your first time when you are visiting our series of events, which are called Beacon? I can see you on YouTube, but I cannot see you on Zoom. There was a comment. How about the other guys? Can you see me? Can you hear me well? Maybe it's some issue from your side. Yes, I think everybody can hear me and see me. Okay, so let me check. Please type in the chat. Is it your first time visiting the Beacon or you have already visited it? I see first time. Yeah, maybe we have some new visitors. Nice. Someone is trying to join every time. I'm really happy. Okay, first time again. So for most of you seems like to be the first time. Okay. Nice. Okay, then I believe we can start slowly. First of all, let me present myself. My name is Nicoleta Spasova. I'm located in Sofia, Bulgaria. One more comment. I'm located in Sofia, Bulgaria, as I said, and my role at SoftServe is as a competency expert. I'm occupying this position for more than 4 years, and I'm part of Business Analysis office. Today, we are going to have this really exciting webinar on the topic of mastering core or API-heavy projects as BAs. This session will provide insights into why it is beneficial for us to understand the technical side of a project. Lisa, who will be the speaker this evening, she will cover some practical examples. She will highlight some common pitfalls, and we will discuss the most challenging aspects of working on technical projects. So I'm sure that will be a really interesting event. But before that, let me share a few words for SoftServe, especially for those of you who are not part of SoftServe. I'm sure that we have many colleagues from SoftServe who join, but we might also have people who are outside SoftServe. So let me share that SoftServe is a software company and it's with Ukrainian roots. We are specializing in providing consultancy services mainly, and of course software development services, and we provide a really wide range of services including healthcare, e-commerce, DevOps, experience design, AI services recently. So really we have variety of them. I would say that we have presence in diverse locations, and you can see on the slide that the Business Analysis Office was established a long time ago, and now we have business analysts located in different locations, if I'm not mistaken, around 14 locations. And in total, we have 430 BAs at this moment. On the slide, you can also see how you can join us on the social network. So you can use those QR codes and be part of our community. Okay, going further. I just want to share a few educational activities which are driven by us. First of all, we are launching the next group of Business Analysis Foundation course. We are providing all the foundational knowledge which is needed to start your career in business analysis. So in case we have people on the call who are interested in developing SBAs, or maybe like some of your friends or relatives who are willing to start their career in business analysis, so that one would be a really good fit for that. This course will be held in English and will start in October. The next educational activity that I would like to pay your attention to, that's the Mastering Product Ownership Analysis. So we are launching it in November. In 1 month, we are going to launch this course. It's really practical one. It consists of 15 workshops which are tailored to the product ownership analysis. You can sign up for the whole list of workshops, or you can just select a few of them based on your interest, based on your needs. It's quite flexible. And I guess on this next slide, you can just see the QR code where you can find some more information. Let me check the chat once again. Would we have this time API-related materials? I think that our speaker can answer this question, so I will just give her the word in 1 second. I just want to firstly present her, and then she will start with the presentation. So we have the speaker today. It's Elizabeth Hodenko. She's really experienced business analyst within SoftServe. She has this huge experience, I would say, of 7+ years in business analysis. So she's a certified professional. She possesses CBAP certification supported by IIBA. She also has PSPO, and yeah, it looks quite experienced in that. From my standpoint, I can say that she's quite active contributor to our community, as she's leading different activities at SoftServe, and I'm really eager to hear her presentation tonight. So Lisa, welcome. The floor is yours. Let me stop sharing.
Hey everyone, thanks a lot, Nikki, for the presentation. Now I feel obliged to kind of present on the best way, and I'll do my best. Hey guys, I'm really excited to be leading this workshop, this webinar, and it's a pleasure for me to be leading that. Let me share my screen so that we can start. That's gonna be exciting. Right. So just adding a few more words to what Nikki mentioned about my experience. I have been working on quite a few domains and also on quite a few focuses as a business analyst, but a lot of my career has been dedicated to the tech or API heavy projects, working on mostly backend or some data related functionality. And it's not something every BA faces. It's not even a standard business analysis, but it's still analyzing the system. And I think that this is a topic no one talks a lot about. That is why over my experience years, I gathered some challenges, some tips and tricks, which I will gladly share with you today. I think we will be done probably in 45 minutes with information I want to share from my side. If you have any questions meanwhile, don't hesitate writing them in the Q&A section. Also, you may write them in the chat, but just to make sure that I have time to cover all the information I'd like to share. I'll probably just go ahead, and then at the very end we will have up to 20 minutes for discussing anything you're interested in. So don't hesitate asking questions meanwhile, so that you don't lose the point in time when you have some inquiry, and we will cover all of it later. So let's get started with the agenda. Today we're going to talk about what are the kinds or groups of teams, projects which need a technical BA. Then we'll also talk about why you may be interested in learning more from the tech side of a product. We'll talk about what you will need to learn to excel in the technical project. I'll also share some challenges I faced and what are the main recommendations from my side to kind of have a win in these challenges. And lastly, I will share some tips of mine, like the recommended artifacts, the recommended things to do or not to do in such API-heavy projects. So let's get started. We will start with what project may need a tech BA, what kind of teams may need a tech BA. And the first group are transition projects. Right now, there are a lot of them because we have a lot of legacy which needs to be deprecated or automated. This is basically one of main requests. And in case of deprecating the legacy, you have a lot to do with analyzing that legacy product, validating it, documenting the rules, and sometimes, or maybe in most of cases, there are no documentation. So you will need to work a lot with the data, with the interface analysis to see what you need to automate to then bring it to the ultimate future state of this being automated. You will also need to describe the migration plan, lead it, and also be ready to troubleshoot any post-release data issues. So this is where your technical side of knowledge will be very beneficial. The other group is projects where you have integration with third party. And also this is very common because instead of building something from the scratch, the stakeholder will most probably decide to just get the solution which is there on the shelf and is already built. It may be cheaper in most of cases. So in this case, if there is something third-party tool, you will also need to analyze it, to read its documentation, to map whether its capabilities map with the user journey on the product you work on. You will also need to demo the integration, validate that it works correctly, and troubleshoot issues, if any. And it also, in most cases, has a lot to do with the core or API itself. Next group is kind of obvious, developing core API services. And here I want to emphasize that API is still a product. It may not be obvious because sometimes when we think about the product, we think about something fancy, user-facing, but the service itself is a product. And in this case, you kind of stay on the other side of this integration with third party, where your product actually provides that functionality for some other products to use it. So you will still need to own that product, to write the requirements for this product, even though it's not like a beautiful mobile app or something. So yeah, you will need to understand what it is, how to work with it, how to represent it to both internal consumers, if let's say you write something for the internal employees of a company, and external in case if the API is sold as, again, like software or like, yeah, as a service to some external customers. And the last group is also not obvious, but still, when the team has a newly formed team roster, the team representatives will need more of your support. Of course, in ideal world, we have the cross-functional team with all kinds of expertise, but in reality, sometimes it's just cheaper to have all the junior representatives. And almost all the time, the only thing they can do the best is develop something. So your job as a BA is to kind of shield them and provide them as much context as possible, as much support as possible, so that they can design the optimal solution, only care about the development, and then like only further proceed and extend their expertise to being more of a like solution strategic thinker. But at first you need to understand what they do and how it is better for them to do it, to guide such junior team representatives. Other than this, why else you may be eager to learn the technical side of a product? Well, at first, it will make teams' life easier. So you will become the team's best friend, developers' best friend, because you will understand what they talk about. You will talk the same language, and they will understand when you talk about, because most probably you will adjust your phrases, your languages to something everyone understands. Another thing is that you will be able to find answers to your questions yourself. So let's imagine you are interested in some data states in the database, and instead of asking the team to find that data for you or to test some API for you and distracting them from their work, you can do it yourself. So you are independent and you don't waste team's time on such questions. And another benefit is that when there is any requester, any stakeholder who requests for the new functionality, you can be that front door which will listen to the request and be able to advocate for a team, even without going to the team to consult about it. Ultimately, of course, you will need to make sure that, like, whether it's feasible or not, some details about implementing the request. But at first point, you will at least be able to say that this is a huge request, or this is a small request, or we cannot do it because we don't have such functionality, or we don't need to wait, the functionality is already there. And in order to be able to tell that in the projects which are API heavy, you need to understand what is inside this project, how it works, how it interacts, and what are its possibilities. The next benefit is that you will help your product manager a lot. You will let the product manager concentrate on the strategy, which will again let the product itself excel, because the product manager will be able to do their work best while you're going to be focusing on the tactics. This will also help you to establish the higher trust between yourself and product manager, which will ultimately help you transition to the product owner role, because product manager just knows that you know it all, you can do it all, and they can delegate you the backlog allocation, the prioritization, the solution ownership, once they're sure that you can do the basics on a good level. And I know sometimes the boundaries between product manager, PO, product owner, and the business analyst are pretty vague, but still in most of the projects, the BA is the one who's responsible for requirements on more tactical level. Product manager is someone who thinks about the strategy and actually brings these requirements. So to be one level up and to really own the product, just prove to the product manager that you can do it. And the more you know, the more the higher the proof is. Another thing is that you will truly be a part of a cross-functional team. We all know that the idea of a Scrum is having a cross-functional team, and you will be able to help them with some non-obvious responsibilities, such as, for instance, troubleshooting some bugs or some support requests coming about your product, because really there is no role whose responsibility is to troubleshoot bugs. So you can be the one, you can help the team, you can help the product manager for your products to be in a better spot when all of this is covered quickly and is troubleshooted quickly. And also you will be the first contact point for any team-related questions. And it may treat your ego, because like the stakeholders will know that you know everything. And the client, the stakeholder, they don't really like coming to 5 people to answer 5 different questions. They want to have one person which knows it all. So you can be that person who knows a bit from the technical side, a bit of the product side, a bit of the context side. So being cross-functional in terms of knowledge really benefits you because you will be the golden source of truth and a person everyone will come to. And the other thing I want to highlight is that technical product manager role does exist as a separate role. It's not a standard one, but there are a lot of vacancies saying, hey, we're looking for technical product manager, which to my mind, it's just like there is no better person who would fit it rather than a business analyst who knows about business side of the product and also has the technical background, who is technical. So two of these make the perfect TPM. If you consider the this side of movement towards your career ladder, it will widen your career opportunities. These were the benefits. So hopefully by this time you already want to learn more about the technical side of the product. And now let's cover what are the main things to learn. We won't dedicate a lot of time to this section because I want to share more of a practical side, but still this is important for you to understand on what is the amount of non-obvious, non-standard BA techniques or tools you will need to learn. The first is API testing. So of course, when you work with the services, with API, you will need to test it a lot. You will need to work with the API clients to do all of it. So at first you need to set up the client itself, the infrastructure, all the permissions to be able to use it. And here you may see the most common examples like Postman or Swagger. But there are a lot of them. The interface for all of them is more or less similar. So once you learn how to use one of them, there should be no issues for you to switch to some other interfaces. And also what you will need to do inside these clients is most probably you will need to call the API. So in order to do it, you will need to know some HTTP principles, how REST works, what are different type of requests are, what does GET mean, what does patch or put mean, so that you understand what team talks about, so that you understand how to read the service documentation and you understand how to compose requests. And for it, you also need to know the request parameters to be able to read and interpret what is needed, what is expected as a result of a given request to the API. And also, of course, it helps to know, this is a must, to know the microservice architecture and what the API itself is, what are the other components API interacts with, how it works with the UI, how it works with the database, just the main principles. And there are a lot of courses on Udemy and other sources, which are pretty standard and cover these basics. They don't go too much into details. So I don't think it will take a lot to learn it, but this will give you a good basis to move further. The other useful tool or set of tools are the ones for event monitoring. And these are the tools which are, there are a lot of them, so I won't even name the list of them, but they will help you to actually see what events are happening with your service, to, let's say, trace some user logins, the user actions, review the recordings and see what endpoints were called, what API responses were returned in case some issue happened. And this will basically translate the user interface, if there is the UI which uses your API, into the set of API calls, which you will be able to read, trace, and troubleshoot the issue. So you will need to learn the interface on how to work with these event monitoring systems. And you can do it yourself. You can ask the dev team to help you with it. It's really easy. You will need a couple of most common places you will use. So don't be afraid about asking for the help. And also this is very helpful when you plan some breaking change in the API or you plan to deprecate a service. You'll be able to use that event monitoring to see whether the endpoints are actually in use, who are the consumers, how largely they are used, to understand what will be the impact of your change. Moving further, we do have the modeling parts of knowledge. And this is very this is the basics of everyone should know, either on tech specific or on product specific project. But for core projects, the BA needs to work more with other types of diagrams. Mainly these are data flow diagrams and entity relationship diagrams. So you will need to know what these are, how to read this, how to make user-friendly diagrams which kind of combine both technical aspect and user-friendly aspect, so that there is a shared understanding within all groups of users, the technical team, the developers, the external stakeholders who are tech ones, but they're not too much into the project, the product team, for yourself at first, so that you understand, of course, what you work with. And also we'll talk about it in a bit, but like ERD diagram can be easily created by the database client, so you don't even need to learn how to compose them. You don't need to waste your time on it, but you will need to know how to read it. And moving further, the databases, it's kind of related to the ERD. If you work with the API, 95% you will also need to work with the database, because this is where API takes its data from. And you will need to know what the databases are, what are their main purpose, what are different types of the database, what are the elements of the database, how the elements are related to each other, and when we're going to use one type versus the other type. Again, the entity relationship diagram. What are some other types of storages? If, let's say, you use a lot of data which is stored in BigQuery or some other types of big data storages. In order to get the data, you will need to learn SQL basics, and it may sound like a whole new world, but in reality, they're just a couple of requests, a couple of select requests, which you just replace the most important parameters, like you just query for another table and for another field, and that gives you all the data needed. With the modern DB clients, it's really easy to compose them. You can ask for the devs help to get you the group of the request you will need to use, and then just use them without any specific knowledge needed. And the database clients is something you will use, of course, to do this request. They're also all very similar, so it doesn't matter which one you use, and learning the interface is very easy. And the last thing I want to cover here is the non-functional requirements. And I just want to say that you don't, as a BA, you don't necessarily need to be the first point of contact who will do all the inputs in NFRs, because everyone are afraid of it a bit. So it will be the architect, tech lead, the dev team, the QA team who will help you to compose this document. But what you can do as a BA is that you can map that like standard definition of a non-functional requirements type to the example of requirements in your project. And this way it will be easy and clear for all the team what every type of requirement means. And it will be easier for you to understand that like the latency or the performance is something which can be measured by I don't know, like the security, the type of authentication you use, the amount of users you expect. We'll cover that in a bit, but mapping some technical terms to user-friendly examples really helps you to understand what that is about. Let's move to challenges. That is the most interesting part to my mind. We'll start with the writing API requirements, because I think this is something I face most of issues with, or at least faced, and I will share you how to overcome them. Starting with the implementation decisions. It is very tempting for the team to shift the implementation ownership on the BA, because if you are a technical person, where is the boundary of the area you know and area you don't know? So of course, for the dev team, it's the easiest thing is for you to tell them what to do, so that they don't even need to think. But you need to let the team be responsible for the implementation, because your responsibility as a BA is to provide as much context as possible. Who needs it, why this is needed, what is needed, basically explain what will be the input to some endpoint, some logic, what is expected as the output, what should be done to convert the input to the output, or what the conversion should be. But that black box inside on how this should be done is something you should not care about. It's good if you understand what should be done inside. It's good if you can help to specify it in the requirements just for the convenience, but you should not dictate it. And if the team asks you how to do it, let the team own it. So don't answer that question. And also, it would be good if you know that dev language to, again, simplify the understanding of the development team of the requirements, and use, let's say, if-else statement, because that is a common structure they use in the code. Either the developers or even for the QA team, it's easier to compose the test cases based on these if-else scenarios. So you can just say, if the condition is 1, then, then the logic will be the following. If the condition is 2, the logic will be the following, else the logic will be the third one. And it's easier for the dev team to understand that structure. And also, if you know, moving back to the ERD, if you know what are the database components, what are the tables and the fields used for every field you work with, either on the API or on the UI, which basically gets data from the API, use that field names, because there is less unknowns in this case. It makes the estimation quicker and easier, and the dev's life easier as well. And it also helps you to troubleshoot some issues when you know how all the data is mapped. Another type of challenge with API requirements is how the NFRs are managed. And just adding a bit more to our previous topic about how you work with the NFRs. So here's how you can help the team to guide it. You can tell them who will be the end user of the API. Let's say it will be the user authenticated in the system. And in this case, authorization will be based on their credentials. Or it will be some other service calling the API. And that will let the team understand how to make the security, how to make the authorization, either based on the token or based on the API key, in my example of real user versus the service calling. It's not for you to tell them, use bearer token authentication or use API key authentication, but it's your task to tell who's going to use it so that the team can decide the better authentication way. The other example is how you can help the team to come up with the NFRs is what format is the response expected at? Because you know how the API will be used, right? So you know who requested, why they requested, and you know if they are going to expect the file to be uploaded, then the team will use this type of output. If you know that this will be used on the user interface, most probably the JSON format of the response will be there because it's easier to map it to UI. Or if you know that they will expect some file to be generated and represented by a link you can download, that's also something the team will use to design the solution and design the proper format of the response. But you can tell the background of where it's going to be used so that the team decides on it. Another thing is that the performance part is something you can guide based on how often you know this will be used. And you should know it because, for instance, you know that the API requested is to add a new user to a system. And you know that to the organization, there are 6,000 of people who are onboarded on a monthly basis. That lets you approximately understand how frequent that is going to be called, what is the load on the API, or if that is the get endpoint which returns the data, and you know that it will be used, let's say, on login, and you know that there are a billion users in the system. This will be the other type of input, which will let the team understand that the performance testing should be higher. And the last example here is that also regarding the performance, regarding the like how we work with the data we retrieve, you as a BA should understand how big the data amount will be which is returned, and tell the team about it, because they don't necessarily go to the database to kind of check and dive deeper in what are the amounts of data we work with. They just care, okay, we know these fields need to be pulled in this format and they will be returned. But if you know that, let's say, that will be the endpoint which returns the list of employees in the department, and you know that in every department there are 50 employees, that's not too much data to return. And in this case, most probably we don't really need some performance, some stability testing, some caching, because not much data is to be returned. Versus you have the other endpoint request where you need to return everyone, all the people in your system, and you know there are a billion of users. In this case, you definitely will need some caching. You will need the performance testing because there is a lot of data, anything can go wrong. And most probably some pagination will be needed, or some limits on the maximum amount of data you can query at a time, so that you don't overload the system. But it's not your job to decide how to test it. It's the job of the architect and the tech lead and the team, the devs themselves. But you can guide them, helping them with giving that context. And the last example of the challenge here and how to overcome it are complex work items. It's more like a heads up that something which may seem very small from the user-facing side may affect multiple services. Let's say you want to add one more field to be saved in a user biography, for instance, or in their bank account. But this will affect multiple services because you have one service which works in one API, in one UI, another service which is used by other team in another UI, while this field will be used in a couple of places. The UI changes will be needed, the backend changes will be needed, the database changes will be needed because you also need to add that field to the database. Right, and you need several changes in the same API because you need to add that field, you need to return this field, you need to update this field. So this may become a whole new initiative almost, while for user it will be one more field to fill in. So just be ready that work may take more than you imagine, and don't necessarily agree for everyone else asking you to just add something small. Don't hesitate contacting the dev team before you provide any promises of such, unless you're sure and you're very experienced and you know what it's going to take. And also another tip here is that if you have some examples of script work where you need to prepare something and then run it, just be ready to allocate also these two different iterations, because the preparation of the script itself may take some time, may take more than expected. So don't expect that the execution itself will be in the same iteration. It's better to distribute two of these. Let's move further. Refinement sessions. Again, the API-heavy requirements may fall into the implementation specific on the refinement sessions. And you don't really want to do it because the main goal of the refinement is to estimate it and for you as a BA to explain the requirements, while the how part is more for the planning or pre-refinement session of the dev team. So the good thing is to document any ongoing discussion about implementation specifics. It shouldn't necessarily be you as a BA, it may be the tech lead, for instance, or some of the dev team members, but it's good to document them, not to lose the moment. And also you will need to limit the time for refining every backlog item to make sure you don't go out of that time box and you have time for as many items as possible. But if you see that something goes wrong, just ask the team whether the requirement questions or implementation questions affect the estimate. If they don't, just schedule some time to discuss these questions separately and proceed with the estimation. If they do, hold on, switch to other ticket, and a discussion which raised that many questions can be scheduled as a separate call dedicated specifically for the topic. You don't want the questions to be unanswered. You don't want implementation specific to be missed. You just want it not to take the whole time of the refinement session, because its main goal is to review the requirements and estimate tickets for them to be ready to go into the next iteration. And also, other thing I faced with is data issues, working a lot with the data, especially when you have the migration projects, when you have the data heavy projects. Just be ready that there will be a lot of user complaints coming from data in the system being invalid, and you will need to troubleshoot it, most probably because you know the most about the data, what is the state data should be, what are the rules that the data should be in, so you will be involved in it. The reason for it, most probably because on the legacy systems, no business rules were followed, or multiple data sources are used to combine it all into unified experience. So your main goals, your main steps during the data migration will be, first, document the rules and solution paths where the rules fail. So we will review it in a bit, the examples of it, but you will need to specify what rules the data should meet in order to be considered as valid, and what should be the solution when you see the invalid data point. And that will be used by the DBA to do the data migration from old system to a new system. When this migration is done, you will need to support the DBA in decision making if some unforeseen corruptions are met. So again, at this first before step, most probably something will be met, because working with a lot of data, it's almost impossible to predict all kinds of things which go wrong. So during the migration itself, DBA will find something, and DBA is database analyst, the person, or administrator, sorry, the person who works with the data. So yeah, they will have some questions, and you will need to support them to answer these questions. And after the data is migrated, most probably the new system will need to have one more data audit to make sure that all the migration was successful, the data is as you expect. But additionally, just be ready that users will find the issues the delivery team didn't find, because there are a lot of users, there are only a couple of teams in the delivery team, so a couple of people. So what are the chances? The chances are big. You cannot predict everything, so be ready that you will need to receive and be ready for the huge amount of support requests about these issues. So you will become a data geek for a while after the release. Another challenge I face is splitting user stories. And here you will need to educate the team on the best practices, how to do Scrum, how and why to use the vertical slicing, because that is something I talk a lot about with my team, and other BAs in my unit also struggle with. You need to explain the team that vertical slicing is the best way to do it in most of cases, and this is something everyone should proceed with, focusing on the value. So don't hesitate doing the educational workshops inside the team, explaining them how to estimate things, how to behave on the refinement sessions, what is the velocity, why we need the estimates, how we define how much things we can pull in, how many things. And also the estimation basis workshop is a great thing I think everyone should have, regardless of whether it's tech heavy project or just a normal like product user facing experience. Having the basis where you have the example of estimates for all kinds of issues, and like what is the 3 story points, what is 5 story points, what is one in UI, what is one UI plus backend, let's say. This will help the team to have the shared understanding, and then to better estimate their and predict their velocity. Also be ready to face the resistance, and that is something I want to highlight. Despite your being the leader and the knowledge keeper about how this should be done, understand that this is still stressful for a dev team to keep that vertical slices. And by the way, vertical slice is when we have multiple types of work items done at the same time. So imagine you have the cake and you have multiple layers where each layer is a complete piece of cake you can eat. So in the case of the user stories, the vertical slice is a piece of functionality which can go through the end-to-end testing and bring some value. So it includes the user interface, the API updates, the database updates, any other types like design, anything which brings the functionality to its to the end user and brings the value. So you need to understand that it is stressful for a team to work in such way because it's harder to plan dependencies in this way. It's harder to plan the time constraints in this case because they understand that they need to complete everything in one iteration, and it also adds some risk because okay, some stories were done, let's say the backend was done, the database was done, the UI didn't have time to finish the integration. Team is upset because the whole story, the big story, isn't finished, while some parts of it really were finished. So your goal is to explain to the team that we are not aiming for numbers, we are not aiming for, sometimes we do, the project managers sometimes do, but we don't aim for the perfect, the backlog decrease, the burn down chart to be ideal. The goal is to have the end user see the value. And in this case, you need to do everything at once. Of course, you need to know how to properly slice the stories using different techniques to have the smallest possible pieces which have all parts of this cake. But be ready that the team will be resistant and you will need to educate and do your best to have the backlog in the proper state and the results of every iteration be shippable increments. I also want to highlight that exceptions still do exist. And in this case, there are some horizontal slices, let's say backend only, which are complex enough to dedicate the whole iteration only to it. And there is no way to split it. There is no way to make it smaller. Okay, in this case, just breathe out and have the story itself, the task itself dedicated to only backend. Yes, it won't let the end user know about something you've done by the end of the sprint, but maybe then it will take not much time or, we don't really care. It will take some time to do the integration and to bring that value to the UI. You cannot always do it in ideal way. Also, there may be, of course, dependencies on other teams, different teams even working on different slices of this horizontal, different horizontal slices. And you cannot really do anything with it because if one team owns UI, other team owns backend. It's not the best way to do it, but sometimes it happens. So in this case, you will also work with horizontal slices. And this will be the case for API-heavy team scope. You just don't have enough vertical slices to split the work in. And also there may be some capacity constraints when, let's say, you don't have enough automation QA capacity to test all the backend work. In this case, you need to shift the percentage of work you pull into the iteration to have more UI, just because you can test it, and less backend because you don't have enough resources to do it. In this case, some of slices will be horizontal with UI only, but then maybe later when you have those resources back, you will make it even. So not every time everything should go perfect. And also just remember about enablers. They are sometimes missed and skipped in the planning, in the refinement session. They're not taken into complexity estimation, but enablers themselves may take the whole iteration to implement them, such as preparing some skeletons, creating a new repo, setting up the requirements, the environment, the permissions, the database. Just don't hesitate asking team and challenging them, is it everything which should be done? Do we need to do something beforehand? And if so, just plan it accordingly. Let's move to the tips part, because I think these are most of the challenges I faced with. And at the end, I will be interested to view in the chat whether there are some challenges you faced. We can discuss it all together. But now let's talk about the documentation. And the first type of the documentation I use a lot is entity relationship diagram. We talked about it already. I wanted to highlight that there are two ways of doing it. The automated way, auto-generated view by SQL clients, And it's a great way to read the diagram because it has a lot of information. It has all the fields. It has the relationships between the field types, which is most probably be the beneficial view for the technical people. And it's easier to create it. But there is also the entity-only view, like a big picture view, which includes the most important information. And here you may see that these squares, they only have the entity name, and then you have the user-friendly description of what are the relations. And in my example, let's say we just say that one agent ID, like the membership identifier, can be assigned only to one MLS, which is a multiple listing service. Or in this case, we say that one market center can have one or multiple brokerages, while one brokerage can be a part of only one market center. This lets you understand what this relationship signs mean. Also, ideally, you understand both the user-friendly description and what the sign mean. But if there is someone who is less technical, it will be easier and quick for them to read how the entities are related and what are the rules on how the data can be created. Oh. That is for ERD. The other type of documentation, which is a must, I think, and I use it in all of my projects, is the data dictionary. And this goes from that ERD we just reviewed and provides more insights into specific entities. So what is it? What does it mean? Where it is used? What are the business rules of data used inside it? And I just create such table for almost for every entity, which is not that obvious, let's say, with the list of fields, their types, whether they're required or not, what that field means, like what is the description, and what are the business rules to manage this data. And it helps first with data audit and cleanups. If you remember, we talked about it before with just reviewing, okay, whether the data follows these rules, whether we should clean something up if it doesn't follow the rules. Let's say if there are some required fields which are not present in the records. In this case, we will need to populate them. And also it helps a lot with implementation and testing because not everyone has the shared understanding or not always about the database fields because like one person works on one entity, another person works on other entity. And when it's their time to switch, this may be something new for them and also for the QA team. So having such documentation helps you, the product manager, the stakeholders, the dev team members, to understand what is the data they work with and see some rules. And it will also help you if you do some changes in the future to see some dependencies and basically understand how the data is formed. Then the data flow diagrams, we also talked about it at first in the beginning. It shows how the data flows in ecosystem, how the name says. And also, to my mind, it is a must as well for transition projects, where you will need to build the current state and the future state. And in my example, there are two future states. We have the MVP version and we have the ultimate version. And we won't go too much into details, but you may see that there is a difference, and clearly the more in the future you go, the easier it is to read it because the less the data flows are there because we want to simplify everything. And it helps a lot with the troubleshooting, and I have a great example about it because it navigates the investigation paths. Let's imagine, in this case, you may see that we have some applications, a list of legacy applications, which use legacy database. And let's imagine something goes wrong in one of legacy apps. Let's say the field isn't shown, or something looks broken, or something is not saved. How to investigate it? Well, we know, based on the diagram, that the data is taken from this Oracle database. So let's query the Oracle database and see whether the data is present and is correct there. If it is correct there, okay, let's see, maybe something is broken on, if it is incorrect there, let's see whether this corruption was pulled from the other data source if it's not the source of truth. So we see here that there is the ETL, which pulls data from AMS database to this Oracle database. So let's see in AMS whether the same data looks correct there. If it is also broken there, let's see if it's not still like where the data is initiated, or in this case, this is where data initiated, but this comes from the user interface. So we have this support tool, which is something new. So this may lead us to the assumption that maybe something is wrong with the support tool posting incorrect data or somehow processing the data you input from the user interface incorrectly, and the data is saved incorrectly in the first database. It flows incorrectly to the second database, and then ultimately it is displayed incorrectly on the legacy system. While there may have been a case when something is wrong in the legacy, something is wrong in Oracle, but something is correct in AMS. That means that maybe something is in ETL is broken and you need to see how the data is in between two databases. Or if everything is correct in Oracle, maybe something is wrong with how UI in legacy interprets this data. So this is a very powerful tool for you to see where the issue may happen, especially when all of these databases are managed by different people, different teams, in different departments. I have this case, and I had examples of people coming to me and asking, we have data in our system, which is not correct. What to do? Without having this DFD, there is no chance you can find the answer, because so many parts in this branch, in this chain may have gone wrong. So this like navigation through the investigation path is really helpful. And ultimate state, you may see it's really clear and easy, something we should strive to, because the less data flows there, the less issues may appear. Another non-obvious thing is end-to-end API scenarios, and I think this is very beneficial for API-heavy teams. And this will allow you to mimic what the end usage of the API will be to get the job done. So imagine you have the service, which has 10 endpoints which need to be demoed. How to demo it properly and how to understand what is the end goal, how this endpoints interact with each other to make sure that end-to-end flow, which will ultimately be used somewhere on the consumer side, is correct. So you as a BA, because you should understand what the endpoint is used, how they work with each other, you can build this scenario which will map the user journey to the API. You may see that there is the scenario, the use case when you need to change the sponsor. You show some UI kickoff or of like what will be the starting point of using it. And then you say, as a user, I will create a sponsorship correction request for this person with this identifier to change the sponsor to the other person. And you actually add the example of the request, which will be there. So here's the example of the request. Then once the request is created, you get it, you check the data, you show it, like you as a BA highlight what should be shown to demonstrate that this is what we expect. And then you go through the list of approvals. When the request is created, it is received, we see it, and then we update it with approving by like all the levels of approval needed. And you say, okay, approved by the first level with this status, approved by the second level with this status, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, you see the end goal with the profile being refreshed and the new sponsor being shown. It also makes the demos entertaining because it may be boring for stakeholders to just look at the Postman or some other API client and the developers just calling multiple endpoints in the row. The developers should tell the user story and the user journey, and you should guide developers on how to do it, and such scenarios is a great tool to do that. We are getting closer, guys, to the end, so hold on with me for a bit. The other part of documentation is the sequence diagram. It's also something the BAs use a lot, but it's also really a good tool for the backend heavy projects where you have a lot of systems. And here you may see all the systems or services with the timeline. Timeline is optional, but again, I think it helps you to have the user-facing understanding on what period in the timeline each service goes into play. So we see the beginning of the month, the middle of the month where some adjustments are done, like the organization closes their reporting period. then we do any adjustments in the structure if needed, then we do the money calculation, then we do the report distribution, then we do the payments. It's basically the process of calculating the salary, let's say. This is essential, where you have multiple systems interacting with each other. And here you may see every service, how it interacts with each other, what are the data points and the actions with this data and the directions of this data, and how this flows between from service to service, and what each service is responsible for. And also you show the time of life in that sequence where the service goes into play. So again, in case when you have one process which pulls data from several systems with the ultimate outcome of money being paid, it's a great deal to have this all documented to make sure that nothing is missed. Another type of the diagram is activity diagram, and all BAs use them a lot, but I here have the example of how to interpret it to the core project. It helps you to visualize decision points on data management, and I want you to not hesitate incorporating, let's say, adjusting the standard tools or the agreement, the contract of the activity diagram to your needs. It shouldn't necessarily be the ideal view of the activity diagram, but as long as you and your team and the stakeholders understand it, it does its job. So in this example, you can replace the actions which are done on the decision points with the endpoints themselves and some conditions for data management. So here on my example, we have the list of endpoints, which this is the parallel or inclusive action. Any of the endpoints can be called. And then based on what endpoint is called, you show what will be the event posted to the topic. So you can also replace the activity names with data specifications and data storages. In my example, I replace it with data specification, specifying what is the name of the event, which should be saved. And based on the endpoint, we have different event names. And then once we know what we should post, we should see where it is posted. And in our case, it will be posted to 2 places. And also you may see here that there are some rules incorporated. Like if there is no record, we will create a new one. Otherwise, we will update the records and post it to one data storage. And then we'll also post it to another data storage. Again, it's not necessarily follow the initial idea of the activity diagram, but it helps you to understand your very specific environment, and it helps the team to view it in a visual way. And 2 last slides, the tips on how to manage requirements. The first one is to separate epics for tech debt. And working with tech debt is the challenge of its own for the BAs, because in most cases, it's not something requested by consumers, not something which brings obvious value. It's something the dev team knows needs to be done. But you as a BA should help to organize it all. So help the team to separate it at first to separately UI tech debt and backend tech debt. And then within these buckets, identify some improvement goals to create even smaller initiatives, even smaller epics with a fixed scope for each, and that smart call with the defined KPI for each. This will help you, project manager, engineer manager, everyone to plan the implementation of tech debt rather than having these catch-all epics which last forever and have all kinds of tech debt requests in it. And also, when you plan for the iteration or you plan for the quarter based on what type of planning you have, don't forget to keep a buffer for any requests which are unforeseen from other teams, from this tech debt which may appear. Just always keep a buffer for it. Also, using the compound stores, and the great way to structure it, which I use, is have the parents ticket as the main one with the business value, with the ultimate goal you want to reach, and then create the child task based on how you manage it in Jira in other requirements management software. Child or subtask, which will be linked to this main, which will cover every horizontal slice. So as the example, you may have UI as the main task with the full user story, the end goal of a user, complete functionality. Then you have API updates in child tasks. And if you have, let's say, multiple endpoints which needs to be completed, create a separate child story for every endpoint so that it's easier to do it, to mark it as complete, to track its completion and to close it. And then DB adjustments as a child task. This way you have a lot of like horizontal layers done separately. They can be done in parallel by different people, but the ultimate goal will be reached only when all of them are closed. Then also think like a dev team. So this is something I already mentioned. If there are multiple endpoints affected by the change, create a separate one for every route. Don't hesitate to talk in dev language and using the database field, database names, API route names, fields inside them. If you know it, use it because it will make team's life easier. But another important thing I want to highlight here is that when you receive the feature requests, anyone who requested, like people outside of your team, ask what is needed and why is needed rather than just listening to them. Let's say they want you to add one more field to the existing endpoint because they already use it and they want to retrieve that field. It's very tempting for you to create the story and say, add one more field to that endpoint. But instead, ask why this is needed and what is the ultimate goal of adding that field, and then consult with the team on the best way to do it. So again, this is about team owning the solution. Maybe there is already the existing endpoint which can be reused by that requester. Or maybe it's better to even create the whole separate endpoint because it doesn't make sense to add it to the existing endpoint because it just doesn't fit logically there. So don't always agree to what is asked, because if you understand something, it may be tempting to just like quickly and easily do that. But the dev team should decide on the best and optimal way to do it. And also just be effective. And here, this part is about the reusing the requirements. If you have duplicated requirements, and it's a common thing in the tech-heavy projects, you have some repetitive validations, repetitive data rules, create the confluence with the description, all of it, and just refer to it to all of the tickets. This helps you to write less. That helps team not to overestimate it because they will just see the link to the reusable documentation instead of just seeing like 10 lines of the specifications in every ticket. Also, it helps to avoid over testing. If this part was already tested, it helps to define the dev team what can be reused from the technical side. So it's a very beneficial thing. And the other tip is just own the product, like how to be the best, how to do your best work. First, contribute into the definition of done. Also, don't hesitate owning it. It's the dev team who should agree on it, but don't hesitate suggesting your improvements. In this case, one of good suggestions is to log the user actions as a definition of done. So depending on what are the possibilities the team can do it, either use some service to log it or just log it to the automated this like event tracing. But if there is a way to log any changes, then it will be easier for you and for the team themselves to see the changes made, to see them in the user-friendly way, to see the history of changes when it comes to troubleshooting. And this should be set up once, and then the readable logs will be available for any further issues. Also, don't hesitate asking for more access, because it may be, again, easier to just stay within the boundaries you have and say, I don't have access to the database, or I don't have authorization to call that API. And this way you will be you won't be doing the task just because you cannot. Instead, ask for permissions to any tools which can be given to you, which you find useful, like again, database, API keys, test credentials, the access to analytics, event tracking resources, because it gives you more ownership, it gives you more knowledge, it makes you more experienced, and it increases your value a lot in the eyes of others. And also be proactive. Volunteer to be the point of contact for any external stakeholders. Again, this may play tricks with you with other people just pinging you all the time because they know that you know answers to everything. But I mean, they will value you. They will have you as a valuable resource, and they will propose you maybe as a candidate to some promotions, if anything, or will present you to some other people. It's a great networking pros, the advantage. So just don't hesitate telling people that you know something and help to answer the questions. And then you will be both teams and clients' best friend. And that is everything from my side. So thank you guys very much. I will probably stop sharing to go through the questions. Let's see. I will start.
We have questions in both channels, in the chat and in the QA section too.
Awesome. I will start with Q&A. Okay, is it not be a job to do user story decomposition? It is be a job to do user story decomposition for sure, and decomposition is about splitting it. So you as a business analyst should know the best ways to do it. There are multiple techniques. One of the powerful ones is called spider, where you basically break it into the I don't remember specifically what this stands for, like different paths, different interfaces, different data points you work with, the business rules, and to be honest, I don't remember what S stands for, but it's like spider, like the animal. Or there is also like the invest rule and how to break it down. But like ideally, you should decompose them for them to still be vertical, for them to still have all the slices of the functionality. I hope I answered that. Auto-generated one can be done only after implementation. Right, that goes about the ERD and auto-generating it. Yes, you should have the database ready in order to generate it. But you can start with building something similar, which looks like auto-generated one, and then ultimately build the auto-generated ones. The database is set up. I don't know actually whether there are any tools which can, I mean, there are definitely the diagrams which mimic the auto-generation view, but yeah, you should have the database to build the ERD of it automatically. And then who supports all the documents, entities, fields, connection, they change all the time with new features. If that is a question about the entity relationship diagram, this very much depends. I mean, if you have the auto-generated one, you can just regenerate it and re-upload it. If you have a rapidly developed project which has the database changes a lot, then maybe it doesn't bring a lot of value to create manually the ERD all the time, but it may be also the part of definition of done, which you add and agree with the team, and someone from the dev team or QA team does it. You have the shared Confluence page where the up-to-date ERD is uploaded, and once you know that a new field is added or some relationship is changed or the new entity is added, the part of completing the story will be regenerating the ERD. Everyone who has access, everyone in the dev team has access actually to that tool, and everyone can do it. So instead of you taking care of it, let the team do it. Yeah, in my case, I can do it. So I mean, it's based on how you agree it with the team. Ideally, let the dev team do it, but just know that this can be done, and don't let them trick you.
And by the way, the question here might be a bit more general, like when you are needed to maintain all that documentation that you have shared, like the data dictionaries and all other artifacts related to that. So is it too much work just for one BA to keep them all up to date?
I mean, I hear from a lot of BAs that it may be too much of work, but I am a documentation geek. So for me, it brings some like pleasure to actually have everything documented and structured. And to be honest, I don't think it takes a lot of time to maintain it because it should be the part of your own DoD, a part of your project. When you have the new feature, a new requirement comes in, you just have the template on how to specify it, on how to have it documented. You have it documented and most probably you move to the other feature. Or if you have updates in this feature, just add it. It's not tons of work once you have the basis established. If you have no documentations at all, of course, it will take time for you to have it all done. But unfortunately, it's no one else's job to keep the business documentation up to date rather than yours.
Agree.
Okay, let's see what we have in the chat. Or guys, if you have some other questions, don't hesitate writing them to Q&A meanwhile. Let's see.
The very first one was about, are we going to share any API-related materials?
Yeah, I mean, probably nothing other than what is already shared. And I would like to hear the specification maybe to that question, the elaboration, what exact materials, if that is a course or something to learn the API basics. I myself just go to when I shared it for other BAs, to the Udemy and just type in API basics. I don't think there is any difference in what course you take because they're all about the same.
Okay, thank you. Then we have one question from Anna. How would you tackle the case when you created several user stories based on feature decomposition, business value, but backend developer says it's one API? And Yevhen, he already provided a comment. He was quite active today. Thank you, Yevhen, for that. So yeah, what is your comment here, Lisa?
Yeah, well, one API depends on what is meant by API. If API is equal to the service in this case, and you have the task to build a service, then yes, you build in one service, but that is a lot to take care about it. And to be honest, I doubt it can all be done in one iteration. If it can, perfect. You just create a small story to create one service and handle it in one iteration. But if it goes higher and you have the endpoints inside one API, one service to get the data, to manage the data, to validate the data, like validation itself may be a separate the separate story, the decomposition, because it goes about the like business rules part of that spider splitting approach. So yes, you will most probably have one epic or one initiative for the service itself to have the ultimate goal of this service being ready to use. And every endpoint can be story, and even one endpoint can be broken down in multiple stories, because I had cases when one endpoint was implemented for a couple of months, just because it's very heavy. It has a lot of logic in it. It has a lot of validation. It has to do with a lot of data, has to do with a lot of entities. So you may want to break it down even to more items, but answering it on the higher level, if you think that you should split it one way and the dev team tells you that it should be the other way, as long as it does not go against all the rules, maybe it's better for you to listen to the dev team, because it's for them to implement it. And if you split it one way and they tell you that that's not the way it should be split because we cannot do it's not feasible to implement it in this way, listen to their suggestion and just come up with a shared solution how to split it so that it's ideal for you and for the dev team. Data dictionary for non-relations database. I don't. We do work with relational databases, but I don't necessarily see how this will be different. I mean, the structure of the table may be different, but you can describe in the documentation what are the type of documents, what will be included into them, maybe with some exceptions. But I cannot come up with a example, like the real example I can share, unfortunately. How do you make sure DFD is not missing something critical? Oh, that's a good point. That is what you need to validate with all the stakeholders, and that is the common pitfall as well. You as a BA will need to gather everyone, listen to everyone, and build the DFD based on what you hear. Basically, you have the workshop where all the people who work with the system or with multiple systems are there, and they just tell you, okay, you ask them to tell a story, or you ask them to tell what parts they know, and you compose it all in one thing. Once you have the first iteration of the DFD composed, run it by these people, run it by other stakeholders, run it by as many people as possible. And maybe even in this case, something will be missed. And we had these issues, and the only way to make sure is to show it to as many people as possible and make sure you're not missing anything.
Okay, I think one more question left in the chat. Do you usually take part in API contracts design?
That's that's a tempting one because I consider myself pretty technical, and sometimes I do. But in most cases, I found that I'm wrong with it. So I teach myself not to do it and let the team define the contract, especially when there is the compound story with UI and backend. In this case, I don't even touch the contract because the UI dev and the backend dev should decide between themselves what the contract is going to be. I do specify, though, the fields which should be returned. And for instance, if there are nested fields, when you have the object, like 5 objects return, and inside every object you have a list of fields, each object representing the database entity, I will specify all of it. And it may result in what the contract looks like. But if there are some additional fields like the identifiers, which I don't care about, but this may be needed, let's say, to update the data later, the team will add it on their own.
Thanks, Lisa. And I think that there's one more into the Q&A section. It's from Alexandra. Where do you manage the definition of done actions in Jira?
I have the one for my team documented in Confluence, and then this is something which just everyone is aware of and everyone has a shared understanding on. I don't think there is the one proper way to do it because, again, it's up to the team. And sometimes things are missed because, right, there is no checklist in Jira for the DoD. That is why something may be missed. But I know that the QA team, for instance, have their own definition of done on how to test the ticket, and they create the checklists in Jira, and they just basically check them all. So yeah, I use the combination of Jira and Confluence, but this also doesn't work all the time, and the team misses it. And to be honest, I don't think this is BA responsibility to keep that definition of done is there. It's the QA team responsibility, the tech lead responsibility. You should know what should be there, and you can contribute to it, but don't feel obliged to take accountability for that.
Okay, guys, any other questions? I think we don't have any others posted into the chat or Q&A section. Well, from my side, I would like to thank you, Elizabeth. I cannot even imagine how much information you have shared for 1 hour. It seems that you are working in really technical projects, and while I've been listening to those challenges that you have shared, those were not that obvious for me, so I haven't been thinking about that before. So it was really interesting, and I took some insights for myself. Hope that all the guys on the call has also taken some notes for themselves. Yep, we have many thank you messages within the chat, so it was quite useful information for everybody. Thank you very much for presenting today, and thank you very much for joining this call. We will have the recording. We will have YouTube recording. So guys, if you want to share your comments, your feedbacks, feel free to do it in YouTube. There is nothing more from my side, so thank you once again, and have a great evening. And I can see Marta has shared the link to YouTube, so yeah, feel free to visit it and to post your comments.
Thanks, everyone. It was a great time, I think, and I hope it will be useful. Thanks, Nikki, for the feedback. It's really great to hear it, guys. If you have any additional questions and you're a part of Software, don't hesitate reaching out to me in Teams or some other channels. I will be glad to share more of my experience if you have some specific questions.
Thank you.